Once, long ago, we damned the galaxy. We thought we knew all there was to know. We believed the winds of fate blew at our beckoning whispers. Pleasure and enlightenment were our twin birthrights, until our poisonous vanity ignited the stars. Since that day, we have lived in fear of she who thirsts, the goddess that swallows our souls. Yet, there is a new melody in the galaxy's great song. A harmony unheard by my people for over 10,000 years. Hope.
Welcome to the Objective Secure Podcast. My name's Mike.
Hi, I'm Emma.
This is episode 46, Rebirth. We're going to be talking about the rise of Iliad, more specifically the Index Xenos article that featured in May 2019's White Dwarf on the Inari. This is in one of my favourite factions for Warhammer 40,000, and the White Dwarf has given me a reason to actually paint the 3 characters of Iliad.
Mm-hmm. And you've been writing about this on the blog
Yep.
as well?
Because I want to put them on the table. It's kind of interesting because I bought these models way back in the release of them at 7th, and as we'll talk about in the main topic today, there's a reason why they didn't get painted, and then there's more reasons why they didn't get painted at the start of 8th, and now I actually want to use them. So they're actually going to see some table time shortly, probably as part of the upcoming Apocalypse game if I can get my finger out and paint them. It's only 2 or 3 models, so we'll see if we can get them on the table for that and kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
That's next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really better get a move on.
So if you listen to our last episode, you'll know that we have a new copy of Apocalypse Warhammer 40,000. It is essentially a new game system, but we do now have our first game lined up with one of our good friends Dizzy with his Imperial Army versus my Eldar.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be recorded in about a week and a half's time. And we're going to do that with video and audio and all sorts of stuff. So we're going to share that with you guys. And then we'll probably do a wrap-up podcast following Apocalypse with Dizzy on board to talk about what we learned and how the game works and some of our learnings about what we, what has improved for that scale of games, because it is going to be quite a big game to play.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen, before we get into the topic though, we've seen Warcry previews again this week, and the box set. I don't know if they've officially done the announcement for the box just yet, but I did see it on a local supplier this morning. Have you seen the terrain for Warcry in the box yet?
I have, yes.
It looks amazing.
It does. I guess what a lot of people are wondering is what it's actually going to be.
It certainly looks more like... it reminds me a lot of Mordheim. Now, for those who don't have that reference, it's basically Necromunda, but it was Necromunda, but for fantasy battles.
Mm.
Now, to put that into context, the Necromunda of today isn't the Necromunda of yesteryear, where it was... The Necromunda of yesteryear was basically Kill Team.
Yeah, yep.
But with no 40k factions. It was all the gangs and stuff that we have in Necromunda today. So the new Necromunda is closer to a board game than the old version of Necromunda, where the old version was essentially Kill Team. So I'm wondering whether it's going to sit under the Kill Team spectrum of it being a tabletop light.
That would be
skirmish.
my guess.
Because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, certainly what it looks
There's no
like.
board. Although there was a board. And Kill Team does have an option to play as a board. Yeah. I don't know. It'd be interesting. I love they've done a really good job with all the factions. The models are all really cool.
Mm.
Lots of new styles and ways of depicting chaos. A lot of the players I've seen over the years just add tentacles and horns and spikes, and that's been chaos.
Mm.
These ones, you've got birdmen and you've got like guys with mirrors on their heads and like all sorts of cool stuff. I really like the models. Time will tell to see how it gets picked up. And I thought I'd seen this morning an expansion already.
An expansion already?
Yeah, look, it was...
They haven't even released it yet. How are they
well,
offering an expansion?
To clarify, there was a preview I saw on an independent provider which basically showed packs. Because obviously everyone's big concern was, is it only going to be for Chaos? But the picture I saw, and I'm just going to try and look it up now while we talk, looked like it was the expansion packs to play other races that don't necessarily have this, the core Chaos vibe to it. So it'll be interesting to see what those actually are. Because, it was just something that popped into my head just now. I went, I wonder if that is what those... Because it was pictures of orcs and, all sorts of cool stuff rather than just the new cool Chaos stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just having a quick look on the website that I saw it on. And no, it's not there. That's really helpful.
Right. Okay, well, maybe if you can find that, you can pop a link into the show notes and we can just...
The other one I saw, which I wanted to share, was a box. Now, there's actually been 2 of these boxes I've seen now. This is the first one. It's called Blitz Bowl by Games Workshop. I saw another version called Warhammer Underworlds...
Oh, yes,
Dawn
I saw
something
that
or
one.
other.
Yeah.
Apparently, they're both available from Barnes and Noble in the States. They're being sold. You can buy them online as well for us Aussies. And from what I can gather, they are essentially Blood Bowl and Underworld's light. Like they're lighter entry points in terms of less complexity in game.
Yeah, I know in the Underworld's group, the Perth Underworlds group, there's... I think it was Ryan posted something like, get your kids into Underworlds and they'll never have money for drugs. So, I'm sure that's where I saw it advertised.
But yeah,
not advertised, but,
It's certainly an interesting one. So I've actually just gotten the Warcry. It is actually on the Warhammer community site.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're little card expansion packs for Warcry, just going back to the original topic. So there's one here for the Night Haunt, the Flesh Eater Courts, Legions and Nagash, Gloomspite Gits, Iron Jaws, Bone Splitters, the Deepkin, Daughters of Cain, and Stormcast Eternals. Mm-hmm. So you can actually run them all as part of Warcry, which I wonder how much of that is off feedback from the community when they first announced this and everyone went, is it just going to be Chaos? And I think part of me goes, it was only going to be Chaos.
Yeah.
And then they went, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to not just, like, people, obviously, if you don't like Chaos and you want to play your Stormcast, well... we want them buying the rules at the very least and the cool terrain and, so, that, at least this way it engages all of the community rather than focusing on part. They've also repackaged the Mausoleum from Warhammer Fantasy in years gone by and called it the Warcry Corpse Rack Mausoleum.
Sorry, and just to... the one that I was talking about was actually the Underworlds for Young Explorers that is being worked on at the moment.
Well, I'm really keen to see what this Blitz... the Blitz Bowl one is, because I think if that's like a Blood Bowl 7's style format, it's quite an interesting way of engaging the community at large in a game system. Like I think they said it was $45 from the Australian website. I think it was $45. So depending on what you get in that, like if it is that sort of Blood Bowl 7 style game where it's 7 miniatures a side and a smaller pitch, that could be quite an interesting way of engaging those people who might like the idea of Blood Bowl but just don't want to dive $200+ into it.
Yeah.
So, I quite like that thought process, although it's really interesting that they're selling them in Barnes & Noble in the States and only online here, and of course there's no advertising for it here because,
it's not in the stores.
It's not really here, so...
Yeah.
It's been an interesting week for all sorts of things for 40k and Age of Sigmar from Games Workshop. Mm-hmm. We've seen Malifaux 3 drop.
Yep.
And Tactics in the City here in Perth have copies now as well, which I'm really excited to get my hands on mine. I'm sure that'll happen when you stop rolling your eyes at me at some point. You
are not purchasing anything else until that Titan is done. That's supposed to be on the table in first week in August.
It'll be fine.
That is a very tight deadline.
It doesn't help if you can't hear as well that I've had 3 days in bed sick and I'm still recovering, and you're trying to ward off the lurgy at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Through sheer willpower
well,
and vitamin C.
you've been fighting it. Well, the kids had it as well, so a bit under the weather at the moment, which is why
That's why it hasn't been done in the last couple of weeks. But before that,
well, we've had the first half of the year was quite busy, given we turned around showing
I'm
it.
hearing excuses.
All right, well, fine. Then I'm just not going to do anything for the next week, and I'll just paint the Titan. How would you like that?
It's probably not the best idea you've had, is it?
Well, there we go. You can't have it both ways.
I kind of think I can. If you're not playing that stupid game on your iPad, you could be painting.
Well, hopefully, once this room is sorted, I can set the airbrush back up, and then...
We don't have a small house.
No,
There
we
are lots of rooms. There is an undercover patio area.
I'm
There
not
is
painting
heaps
outside in the weather like it is.
Put a jumper on. There's heaps of places that you can paint. Don't be blaming it on the fact that the roof's been sorted.
I'm going to blame it on whatever I want.
Yeah, I'm hearing more excuses. Now, tonight... Oh, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. The other thing, before we get chatting quickly about tonight, and I'll probably try and wrangle some recording tonight while I'm out and about. And
That never happens.
we'll see how that goes. While we were out at Hobby Tech Toys in Myrie, who are my sort of go-to place for all things non-Games Workshop these days, they've started stocking Green Stuff World, and I picked up some of the UV resin, the transparent UV resin, which reacts to ultraviolet light. Not a cheap little purchase, but someone I was talking to was saying, "Oh, what are you going to use it for?" And I said, "I really want to muck about with it to see if I can do some water effects with it, do some ice effects with it." And then he said to me, "It'd be really cool to do like a shield that's been like a force field that's been hit by something, and it's kind of expanded out so you can see it under the impact of the hit. So you'd want like to pour this stuff over the outside of a ball of some kind."
Balloon. Then you can pop it.
Well, I came up with a more interesting idea. I'm going to use a golf ball, and I'm going to spray it with...
Where'd you get the golf ball from?
I found it over on one of the kids' shelves.
Right.
I don't know why there's a golf ball, but there's a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to spray it with a release agent, which may or may not just be either coating it in talc, which is what I'd normally put in a mould when I was using resin.
I've been making a whole heap of rocks out of plaster bandages, and in the boxes that the plaster bandages came in, I've got about 12 tubs of Vaseline, so you can try that if you want.
The only reason I don't want to use anything heavy is because I want to get that shape off the golf ball, because that way it's got that little hex grid so that I can then get that little sort of pattern on the shell to make it look like it's like a digital pattern on the resin. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to put some sort of coating on the ball, like I say, whether it's talc or a maybe even cooking, like a cooking spray. And then I'll try. I figured if I ruin the golf ball, well, I ruin the golf ball.
Yeah, it's just if you ruin $20 worth of...
Well, I'm only going to use a few drops of it, just like a little 10-cent piece puddle. Set it off, see if I can peel it off, and then see what I get. And then you can start doing some really cool effects with shells and water splashes, blood beads and droplets and that sort of stuff. There's some really cool ideas that I've had with it, so I'm keen to start experimenting with it. But because of the import licenses around bringing this stuff into Australia, Hobby Tech can't get the UV lights that Green Stuff World sell. So when I bought this stuff from Green Stuff World from Hobby Tech, I said to the boys, "Right, where can I get a black light, a UV black light?" And Hobby Tech is right next door to BCF. And BCF is a boating, camping and fishing store here in Australia that stocks black lights for squid fishing. $10. So went and picked up a black light, so we're going to start playing with that very shortly as well.
Oh, the kids have been playing with the black light quite a bit. You might need some new batteries.
Where's it gone?
On the kitchen bench.
Oh, of course it has.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing which you were going to mention was our event tonight.
Mm-hmm. So you're heading out to Varsity for the second, what we're calling a club night out there.
Yep. So Varsity Project in Morley here in Western Australia. We're there, I think officially it's 7:30.
Sure, let's go with that. I thought it was 7, but probably is 7.
Well, I'm going to get out there before 7 to do this setup and everything.
Yep. And people won't be listening to this until after you've already been, so it won't matter if we tell the wrong time.
That is true. So if you are coming to Varsity tonight, I'm going to try and bring a microphone and some bits and pieces to do some recording.
I'm betting that he doesn't do that, but
Yeah,
you
look,
know,
I mean-
and because I've said it, now he'll do it just to just to prove me wrong. So
We'll see if we can get any recording done. The
and I've
volume,
just checked it is 7:30.
the volume in the venue is quite loud. It's obviously around a mealtime, and it is in a bar.
Yeah.
But it'd be great to grab Caleb, who's the head of marketing for Varsity, who engaged us to come out and host the event.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be great to have him on and chat to him, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to include some conversation with him and what they experienced for the first. Was it April or May?
May, I
May.
believe.
And then we skipped June because that would have been like a week after show.
Would have been 2 weeks after show. It would have been fine.
No, it wouldn't have been fine. We still couldn't get our living room 2 weeks after show where
I
the
know,
terrain
exactly.
was.
So if you had to go out to Varsity, some of it would have left the living room. Would have been perfect.
Well, the way it worked out is better
All right, okay.
because it meant a whole bunch of other things got done around the house.
Mm. So you're out there. Obviously, at time of recording, we don't know what people have been playing, but at the last event, there was Warhammer 40,000. There was Age of Sigmar.
Yep, there was Age of Sigmar.
There was the War Machine Hordes played.
Yep.
Some Underworlds.
One of the guys brought down Titanicus but didn't get a game. He ended up playing Age of Sigmar instead. There were a couple of guys who wanted to play Blackstone Fortress, but then half the group didn't turn up. So they played 40k instead. We ended up with, I think, 36 people playing games. And when you look at the two events on Facebook, the first one had like 50 people marked as going.
Mm.
This one has 160.
Oh, wow. That's got some decent
which is
reach.
a little bit terrifying.
It's tricky because it makes it kind of difficult to know how many tables and things to take.
Well, realistically,
it does have 159 people going.
Realistically, I'm going to take probably 20 tubs worth of terrain and 20 sets of boards.
Mm.
And there'll probably be something like 5 or 6 for War Machine Hordes on 4x4s,
Yep.
and then the balance in science fiction and fantasy terrain
Yep.
on 6x4s. Anything more than that, and it's probably impractical for me to move them around. We've only got so much space in the trailer and the car.
Yeah.
So I think 20 is probably around the limit.
Mm.
That doesn't mean you'll miss out because we are there from 7:30. Last time we wrapped up at 11:30.
Mm.
So there's every chance of getting in 2 games if you're fast, or if you're there early and you grab a table straight away.
It is supposed to finish at 10:30. It is supposed to be 7:30 to 10:30.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I know last time it was 11 o'clock and we started winding everyone up going, okay, guys, like everyone wants to go home now.
That's probably why they're saying 10:30 this time.
We did start later last time as well, though.
No. It was supposed to start 7:30 last time.
You sure?
I'm positive.
Well, in any case, it was a really fun night last time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall anyone not getting a game. There were a couple of guys who did rock up very late and go, can we still get a game? And I went, it's after 10 o'clock.
You need to be really fast.
And we had a couple of the guys from the ATC team come out and were practicing before the event. We've got a couple of the ETC for 40k players coming tonight. We're going to be doing a raffle for raise some extra money for the boys who are flying to... Where are they going? It's not Spain? Croatia.
I'm so far out of it this year.
I can't remember. I think it's Croatia. Anyway, the boys are flying over to compete in a couple of weeks' time. So we're going to do some last-ditch fundraising for them to try and earn them some extra cash to cover the T-shirts and things. And
beer money.
It'll probably beer money. But I know that they've
Not
been...
really.
No.
I am only kidding.
I know that this year they've got a coach going with them as well. Josh Diffie, who's a good friend of ours.
Oh, is he going over?
Yeah, he wasn't going to go over.
No.
And then all 8 of the players on the team have chipped in apparently, and because they wanted him to go over to be coach. So yeah, they've apparently he's going over fully funded.
Nice.
So which is great for him because Down Under Pairings is it was one that the ETC were considering looking at using. They've been using Tawny Keeper for a number of years now. But they wanted support on deck.
Yeah.
And while they're not using Down Under Pairings, as far as I'm aware, it does mean that Josh gets to see them one-on-one to talk about what Down Under Pairings does, which is great. So we wish them all the best. Oh no, I think we've got one more episode that'll come out either just like on the weekend of the event, so he's probably still won't have answers for another month. We've just had the American team championships over the weekend at time of recording. That's just finished. I don't know who won. Because I went on to Best Coast Pairings and it gives you the individual results but doesn't tell you which the teams.
Yeah.
But we put up a couple of photos and videos that were being shared to us by Chad and the team over at the American Team Championships. The video that he sent on the day of setup was bonkers. The AV gear and the laptops and processing power that sat up on that table was just... Although I did find out why. It's because they were streaming all 5 of the top tables simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, he did... I know when we did our live stream last Wednesday, you sort of said, is there going to be any streaming? And he was like, oh my goodness, there's going to be so much streaming.
Well, from what I gather, they were streaming from a table, and then when there was a lull in the game, they just jumped to the next table, and then 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 go back.
So the congratulations to the 2019 ATC 40K champions, the Wobbly Gentlemen. And you have liked that. So it turns out you have read that. And they have actually announced officially now that they are moving it to June 12 to 14 next year. So we were looking at, we've been talking about the Boots on the Ground event. We're looking at going somewhere around the world for an event.
It won't be that for next year.
But yeah, so the reason, that was the one that we were actually looking at because we thought it was going to be July. But Chad did send us a message a couple of weeks ago and say, look, we're thinking it's going to be 12th to 14th of June. And so that's why we can't look at that for next year.
I think the post he's got on there actually says in 2021 it goes back to July.
I haven't seen that.
I'm assuming it's because they're doing a venue. They're doing a venue swap.
Oh right, it does. You're right. It does. And we'll back to our normal July dates in 2021.
I'm assuming the reason that the June dates there is purely because of the venue swap, where they can't get that specific weekend. It'd be nice if venues over here would let you book more than a year in advance, wouldn't it? Because we can't book more than a year in advance for just about anything.
Some of them we can't book more than
6 months.
Weeks in advance.
That's true.
Okay, so yeah, that's who won, the Wobbly Gentlemen.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find the lists.
I don't know who they are.
No, and like I say, Best Coast Pairings hasn't been kind to me to try and figure that out. But hopefully we can find links or put them in the show. If I can find them, I'll put them in the show notes. But look, why don't we take a quick break?
Oh no, I've got one more thing.
You got one more thing?
I was writing a message to say, can you link us to the list? But I would just wanted to, I suppose, shout out. So people may have heard of a podcast. Oh goodness, I hope I get the name right. The As a Man podcast with Mike and Piers. So I was a guest on the podcast, and our eldest daughter has been a guest on their podcast, but that they recorded at show. And for some reason, I decided to jump on board with them and do the push-up challenge.
Yes.
So there's now 6 of us in the team, and some of the team are doing all of the 3,200 and something push-ups over the 21 days, and some of us are doing a lot less than that. But yeah, so we're kind of doing that as well, which is to raise awareness for mental health. And there's some fundraising that goes with that as well, and the funds go to Headspace. But yeah, so just thought I would share that there are a few of us out there who are doing the push-up.
Is there a link I can put in the show notes for people to go and follow along?
There is a link.
Awesome.
So, and yeah, Mike's been posting saying, how many people are doing. So,
all right.
I'm the only girl in that team, and I'm also literally the weakest link. But hey.
Well, I'll put a link so that others can go and follow and support along.
That'd be awesome.
All right. We'll take a break, and then we'll be back to talk Index, Xenos, and RE. Well, having learned from the Assassin's Index that we reviewed, we're going to skip a big section of the fluff side of this index.
Oh, really? I've got in my notes to talk about the fluff section. Why are we skipping that?
Because I've got the White Dwarf here, so this is May 2019. And if you don't have, before we get into the actual topic, I've seen a few people whinging online going, oh, if you're going to delete indexes because you can't buy them anymore, you can't buy Maze White Dwarf anymore, so you shouldn't be allowed to use Inari or Assassins or anything else like that. If you head to Games Workshop's website, first of all, you can usually buy back orders while they're available.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't, they have an EPUB version you can download there of the White Dwarf.
Okay, cool.
So all of these are available as digitals at the very least. This basically is 30... What's we talking here? 14 pages of stories and fluff.
Yeah, well, surely in the 1 minute and 10 seconds that we've said that we're not doing this, you could have given a very brief backstory of what they are. That's part of the thing, isn't it?
Okay. If you know who and what the Inari are...
Skip forward 5 minutes.
Well, I don't know about 5 minutes. We can't
Get on with it.
Timestamp. Anyway. The Inari came about at the tail end of 7th edition under the Gathering Storm books, book 2 specifically, which was called The Fracture of Biel-Tan. Now, at the tail end of 7th, we saw Games Workshop shaking the Warhammer 40,000 universe up and getting ready for the reboot to 8th, and they started doing some really cool stuff. The first triumvirate, which was Saint Celestine, Inquisitor Greyfax, and Belisarius Call, heralded that we got our first Plastic Sisters of Battle, we got a new Plastic Inquisitor, and we got a Mechanicum character that hinted at the future of the Primaris Marines and Guilliman. It hinted, but didn't give it away. Fracture of Biel-Tan gave us the 3 new characters that we'll talk about in a second, as well as the Inari. And basically, prior to the release of Gathering Storm, they released a box game called Death Mask, which featured the new Plastic Eldrad Ulthran, as well as Harlequins and Deathwatch, along with Battle Brother Artemis. Now, I want to say that was the tail end of 6th edition, or maybe it was early 7th, but it came out in a prior edition. And it talked about Eldrad trying to awaken Iniad, which is spelled Ynnead, which is the Eldar god of the dead. And the goal was to basically free them from She Who Thirsts, which is the Chaos god Slanesh. Now, the story that went with that game saw Eldrad partially successful, and the Gathering Storm Part 2, the Fracture of Biel-Tan, picks up where that ends, where he releases this entity into the universe, and it goes barreling across space and time and finds Ivrain, who at the time is a gladiator in the fighting pits of Camorra. And she basically dies in the pit, killed by Lilith Hesperax, and then is reborn again as the emissary of Iniad, where she basically fights her way out of Camorra and escapes, and then heads back to Biel-Tan, where she's originally from, and it all goes to hell in a handbasket, and Biel-Tan as a craft world is broken up into a whole bunch of smaller ships, and then she runs away because they're very unhappy with her, and then we moved into Gathering Storm Part 3, which was Ivrain resurrecting Guilliman. So the Inari have actually been quite pivotal in the last couple of years of storylines in regards to the Imperium and the 40k lore in general, because it's seen the Eldar with a new way of building their armies, which is what the Inari are, but they also saw Guilliman returning to Warhammer 40,000, and in turn obviously giving us options for the Demon Primarchs like Magnus and Mortarion. And
I'm sorry, that backstory is rubbish compared to the one for the Jane Steelers. That was much more gripping and exciting.
Look, there's 14 pages here.
Well, you should have been more exciting with it.
People
can buy
it's a really polarizing set of fluff. There's a lot of stuff in here. I remember when it came out, I quite enjoyed it. But there's a lot of people who take this stuff very seriously, who were not happy with the way the Eldar and the resurrection of Guilliman and so on was handled. And it's... Like I say, I enjoyed it, but I know a lot of people who didn't. So What was probably colouring that interpretation, though, was also the fact that the rules in 7th edition were just a little bit bonkers.
Do you maybe want to give a little bit more of a clarification around what bonkers means? Because that can sometimes mean the rules were amazing, the rules were completely ridiculous, didn't make any sense. What does bonkers mean?
So, okay, to explain the Inari, you have to understand what their faction rule is.
Okay.
So their faction rule is called Strength from Death.
Yes.
And the rule that they gain as a result of Strength from Death is called...
Soul Burst ability. Ha! Got there.
is called Soul Burst. Now, when they released this for 7th edition, Soul Burst essentially meant that any time a unit, not just your own, but any unit, died within 7 inches of a model which had the Soul Burst ability, that model, or unit, I should say, could interrupt and perform an action.
Okay.
So what would happen is you would set it up so that you'd move, say, 5 units into position near enemy units, and then you'd fire a long-range unit and you'd kill an enemy unit that's close to one of your units.
Okay.
Which would immediately let you interrupt the sequence and do something with that unit. So, for example, you'd use your Dark Reapers, you'd shoot, kill a unit, your Warp Spiders, it'd immediately get to move again or immediately get to shoot. Even if they've already moved once already, or if they haven't shot, they can shoot twice.
Okay.
Which you could then use to trigger again and again and again and again and again. And it happened in your opponent's turn as well. So what could happen is they could kill a unit of yours, and then in turn, one of your units instantly activates, Soul Bursts, shoots back, kills an enemy unit which is within 7 inches of one of their other units, which then interrupts and shoots and interrupts and shoots. And you could essentially get 2, 3, 4 more turns than your opponent just by chaining this ability. And it got even worse when you had... I actually played this game out at a tournament, no less, with another Inari player where we both had Soul Burst.
Did you get past turn 1?
No, we only had 2 turns. We tabled...
So that's a yes. You did get past turn 1.
Well, maybe. It's a grey one, because whoever's turn it is gets to choose the order of activations. It meant that when the first Soul Burst started chaining, we ended up about 5 chains deep in the sequence because it interrupted the normal sequence. You'd go, okay, cool, I shoot, I kill that unit, I Soul Burst and you Soul Burst. But because it's my turn, I go first. So I'm going to Soul Burst my unit, and I'm going to shoot and kill that unit. Now, we don't get to go back and do your Soul Burst because I've got a unit that's within 7 inches of the new unit that's dead. So I have to Soul Burst off of that first because it happens immediately. So now that third unit will now shoot. But now I kill something else and you're within range of it, which means that you interrupt and we don't go back to your other choice yet. We have to do this Soul Burst first. And it got very, very, very confusing very rapidly.
I imagine it would be quite confusing. And
It was
complicated.
really, really... Like, we ended up, full credit to Matt, he had these tokens, because you could only Soul Burst once anyway. So once something had Soul Burst for the turn, you couldn't Soul Burst again and again and again with the same unit.
Right.
So he was marking stuff that had to Soul Burst, but
hadn't yet,
and marking them that had Soul Burst, and marking others that hadn't Soul Burst, so that he could figure out which ones were eligible. And it was a real mess. It was really hard to keep track of. And to compound that, we got these 3 lovely models that no one used because you didn't need to in 7th. Because you just basically said, I'm going to use my army as an Ari. And that was the...
So why was that people didn't actually use the models? So the models didn't have great rules, or...
Yeah, I mean, the models I really like them. You've got Evrain, the emissary of Iniad, the Vizarch, who's her bodyguard, and the Incarn, which is essentially the Avatar, which is this big sort of half-demon ghost monster thing, which is a pig to build. The instructions for that model are not good.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Some of them, the instruction models, it's kind of like, when you buy IKEA furniture and the instructions are relatively easy to follow, and then you buy Chinese knockoff IKEA furniture and the instructions, they've got like 8 extra steps and those bits have already been done and you've got 12 extra screws and That's how I kind of feel
Well,
like
this-
with the Games Workshop model. Some of them, beautiful, nice and easy to build, easy to follow, and other bits I look at the instructions and go, oh, that's too hard.
Well, the biggest problem with this kit, so the big swirl of energy that goes around it is in about a dozen pieces.
Yeah.
There's no clear connecting points because they're sculpted in so that they overlap to each other. So you're looking at these 3D modeled rendered instructions, trying to figure out, like they're all numbered, so you know roughly that
Where
what
they
order
go,
you're putting them
just-
in,
Yeah.
but you don't see necessarily how they connect. So it's a very frustrating model to build.
All right, sorry. So to go back, why weren't people actually, apart from the fact, so yeah, the model.
They-
the
they
models
basic-
look cool.
They basically
but
just weren't good enough for what they did on the table.
What do you mean they weren't good enough?
Like a lot of named characters, obviously you can't make any changes to them. You can't build them yourself. Like you can't arm them the way you want to. They do kind of whatever they're designed to do.
Yeah.
The problem is that in 7th edition, the Vizark was essentially just a really dodgy combat character because he had no invulnerable save, despite the model actually having a force shield modelled on his arm, like a bunch of the Eldar characters do. They never gave him the rules for it, which meant every time he hit combat, he just died.
Yeah.
The avatar of Iniad was too expensive compared to the avatar of Cain, who was too expensive to be used to begin with. And Ivrain was basically an average caster. She was okay. Like, I saw her occasionally. But by and large, you were just better off taking your own characters and running those as an Ari to get the benefits of Soul Burst without having to worry about spending extra points on characters that were only middling.
So in 7th edition, you didn't need to use the characters. You could just say, well, this army is an Ari.
Yep.
8th edition, the FAQs came through and said straight away that you do need to use the Inari characters in order for it to be an Inari army. Do you have to use all 3 of the characters?
No. So the way it used to work, and the indexes, the rules for the indexes, and I'm talking about Index Xenos 1 now, the original Inari rules, changed again. Every single FAQ and document that we got after release included a change to Inari, and it changed the way you built the army, it changed the way they soul burst, it changed everything again and again and again and again and again. The last version we had of them meant that as long as your warlord was Inari, one of the 3 characters, then your whole army could or couldn't be.
So you get to choose.
Now the index has the latest version has changed it again.
Okay.
So what we've now got is a situation where Inari is determined by detachment. So what I mean by that is you have to put one of the characters in the detachment to make it Inari. So if you want one of the characters. So if you want to have a Harlequin Inari, a Drakari Inari, and a Craftworld Inari detachment, one of each. So 3 detachments is pretty common for competitive.
Yep.
You would need to put all 3 of these characters, one in each of those detachments.
Ah, okay, right.
So essentially you're limited in Inari to only 3 detachments. It also means there's a couple of weird ones with the current rule set. Like it's not possible to have a super heavy detachment of Inari because there are only super heavy slots. You've got nowhere to put a HQ. And you can't do an air wing Inari, which again is only airplanes. You can, however, get Inari aircraft because there are flyer slots in the other detachments. And you can get a Inari super heavy by putting it in a Supreme Command with one of the characters and then using that to... So basically you do a Craftworld Inari super heavy... Supreme Command, and you'd put, say, a Vrain and a pair of Warlocks as the 3 required HQs, and then you could put a Wraith Knight in there. The detachment is Inari, which means the Wraith Knight becomes Inari. So you can still get a few of those weird interactions happening, like the Wraith Knight's probably the best reason to make it Inari. You could, for example, put a Scorpion or a Cobra super heavy tank into the detachment instead and make it Inari if you were feeling so inclined. I don't know why you would with the current rules, but you could do it. I wouldn't, but you could. So the army is now really limited in how you build it. You have to have these characters, and Ivrain and the Vizark aren't too expensive compared to similar sort of level characters, but the Incarn is the tipping point. The Incarn is over 330 points, when the other two are 120-ish and 130-ish, respectively.
Can we come back to the points for those
Yep.
3 characters in a minute? And I'll even write it down so I remember, except I'm about to turn the page, so who knows if I'll come back to it. But I will try. Okay, so this version that's come out in the White Dwarf is a total overhaul.
Yes.
So we've seen changes each time there's been an FAQ or, different indexes. It's changed each time, but they've kind of been minor tweaks, and a lot of the time there's been changes to points levels and things like that.
Yeah.
But this has been a complete overhaul. So my understanding is that in the past, you could use this without using the characters, but I guess having the Inari option, it almost negatively impacted the rest of the Eldari options, because you could potentially change this to be Inari, and if you did, it would increase the power of your characters. And so they upped the points levels, which then meant if you weren't using your army as Inari, it was to your detriment.
Yeah, I mean, the greatest example of that was the Dark Reapers and the Shining Spears from the Craftworld army.
Now, my understanding is that those Dark Reapers are pretty darn
good. When they first came out, they were cheap. They were probably, and they put them up. I think they went up 12 points at one stage there. Like, it was almost infantry with missile launchers.
No. What points levels are they?
I think they're 20. I think they started at 27 points a model, and they ended up at 39, and I think they're back down now to 32.
Okay.
The problem is that at 20, I think they started at 27 because they were 5 points for the dude and then 22 points for his gun. The problem with them is in Craftworld they were fine, but as soon as you had old Soulburst where you could double fire them, you were essentially getting twice the firepower for no cost.
Yeah.
And it was an exercise in why wouldn't I use them. And it was similar with the Shining Spears, where the Shining Spears were being used to double move and charge things turn one that were 40 inches away that you just shouldn't be able to do what they could do, and they did. Or they'd fight twice or 3 times with the stratagem. So Games Workshop put the points up on both those units significantly, which essentially probably made them fair for an Ari, but made them utterly useless for Craftworld. They were just too expensive for what they did. And I think that they did that to a few units, and as a result, when they redid this, we saw the points come down on a few. Like the Dark Reapers came down. I think they're sitting now at, like I say, I want to say it's like 32 or 33 points a model. And I think the Shining Spears have settled down a little bit as well.
So what have they done to combat that, though?
So Soulburst used to, at the very tail end of prior to this White Dwarf, so April 2019, Soulburst still worked on the theory that you got an extra activation when something died within a certain range of you. However, each of the actions could only be done once per turn, which means that if I couldn't have 3 units of Dark Reapers and have all 3 of them shoot twice.
Okay.
Only one of them could shoot twice. It also was really hard to set Soulburst chains off because you needed to kill things or you needed to cast a Psychic Power, which only worked 50% of the time. With the new Soulburst mechanic, they've basically done away with any free activations. So now Soulburst works on the theory that essentially what the Inari do is they eat your souls. And
see, none of this was in the backstory fluff that you gave me.
Go and read
at
the Fracture Beeltan.
I don't have time to read that. I wanted a 2-minute synopsis, and I got nothing about Soul Eaters.
Well, they're the god of the dead, and if you understand Slanesh and the Eldar, and clearly I haven't given you enough of that.
No, none of it. There could be people listening who don't know this either. Chances are slim.
Chances are slim, yeah. So anyway,
start somewhere, right?
The reason that Soulburst worked the way it did was they basically got invigorated by the souls of the dead, and they were able to operate really rapidly, and that was meant to be reflected in the fact they could move twice or shoot twice or fight twice or any of that sort of stuff. Instead, what they've done now is they've gone, okay, cool, when the Inari are soulbursting, and the trigger is still the same, except that it's not when anything within 7 inches dies, it's just when anything dies on the table. The entire Inari army fights first in the combat phase, all the time.
Okay.
if it's already fighting first for any reason, say for example it's charged and that gives you the fight first ability for that turn, and you get Soul Burst active, then you get +1 to hit, which in practice means that an Inari army charging you under the effects of Soul Burst, and because Eldar being Eldar, they'll generally hit you on 2s on the turn they go in, and they'll get to fight first. Now, the interesting part about this mechanic now, particularly the fight first thing, is it happens, first of all, when anything dies, but it also affects your opponent's turn. So say, for example, in their turn, they decide not to shoot a unit worrying about soul bursting because they want to charge you, essentially. And they go in and they charge and they kill the first unit. Your entire army at that point now has fight first, which means any other combats that are happening, you now get priority to start interrupting their fight sequence and start fighting simultaneously with them because they've all charged.
Okay.
So what it can actually mean is these weird situations where someone... when you're playing 40k, if you've got 5 units that are charged, you get to resolve them in any order you like, but you know that all 5 of those units are fighting before anyone gets to interrupt them.
Yep.
You can spend 2 command points to interrupt once, but generally speaking, that's done in very specific instances to deny things or achieve certain results in combat. With an Inari army, as soon as you kill something, the entire army is interrupting for free. So you go in with your 5 units, your first unit fights and activates and kills something. Cool. Now my entire army strikes first, and so does yours, which means we now take it in turns, because we're fighting simultaneously. So now I get to fight, and then you get to fight, and I get to fight, and we take it in turns, which makes things really interesting for the fight phase in your opponent's turn. But it also completely has to change the way you build to take advantage of the army. Because the biggest problem you have with Inari is the perception that Eldar don't do combat armies. Most Eldar armies, whether it's Craftworld, Drukhari, even Harlequins these days, because of all the Haywire bikes and the pistols that the Harlequins carry, they're all considered shooting armies. And
what did you start the sentence with? That they're not considered what armies?
A combat army.
Isn't a shooty army a combat army?
No, I mean close combat.
Ah, okay. Right. I'm like... I've only ever heard them being an offensive army. I've never heard them being a defensive army.
I'm talking...
That is a combat army.
No,
right.
I'm talking about close combat.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a fairly important keyword that you missed out there.
Oh, I don't think so.
I do. Move on.
So, a lot of people basically, when this index dropped, essentially said, Inari are dead. They're crap. No one wants to use them anymore because you can't soul burst. And they're looking at it from the frame of reference to where they were getting free shooting phases for big units of scatterbikes or big units of Dark Reapers or double moves for Shining Spears. They were looking at them in the context of what they had, not what they were now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the biggest mental hurdle that a lot of players have faced with this army.
Sorry, I'm just here giggling going, oh, what a surprise. Gamers jumping to the worst possible conclusion straight away. Like, that's so unheard of. They're normally so positive and see the upside. Oh, dear. Carry on.
Anyway.
I am listening.
So, I'm just going to give her a moment, folks. Anyway, I'm just going to talk over her now because she's still got a case of the giggles.
Oh, dear me.
So we've seen a lot of people basically bail from playing an Ari of any sort.
Oh, give it a month, I'll be back.
Well, the funny thing is a lot of players had already started moving away from them and using them in combination with sort of one detachment of an Ari alongside non-Anari detachments to kind of get the best of both worlds. I think at this moment in time, there's still an argument to do just that. Because if you're going to take anything combat related, things like Howling Banshees, Shining Spears, Striking Scorpions, Drukhari Witches, Harlequins, anything you want to stab people with, are almost universally better as an Ari. Between the strike first and the +1 to hit if they're already striking first, it means that those units that need to maximize their hits to win the combats do just that. Harlequins are a great example. Like Inari Harlequins are genuinely a scary unit. They're 4 attacks each normally anyway. There's a stratagem that gives them +1 attack. So now you're talking about 5 attacks. It's very easy for them to get reroll 1s to hit in Inari, whereas there's only one way of doing it if they're pure Harlequins. So because of the reroll 1s to hit, and because if they charge and they're Inari and they're soul bursting, they're going to be hitting on 2s instead of hitting on 3s like normal Harlequins. Then they're probably getting reroll 1s where they actually struggle to get rerolls in standard Harlequins.
Yeah.
And then when they go to roll to wound, there's a stratagem and a psychic power that gives them rerolls to wound in Inari, where the only way they can get rerolls to wound in standard Harlequins is with a character stood within 6 inches of them.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, these Harlequins are going to be going in, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, compared to hitting on 3s, potentially with no rerolls. And then their strength and weapons are the same, but they're getting rerolls again more often for the same points. So I think it's going to fundamentally change the way you have to build the army, because you're not going to be building Harlequins with fusion pistols. You're going to want as many bodies as possible so that you can hit as often as possible to maximize those rerolls. And the same can be said for a lot of those units. Things like Striking Scorpions, there's a trigger you can use, which I found, which was kind of fun. Karandras, the Phoenix Lord, who can't be Inari, which should be commented on that none of the named characters can be Inari outside of the 3 that are in the book.
Yeah.
He's got a rule that says any friendly Striking Scorpions within 6 inches generate extra attacks when they roll a 6 to hit. Well, it's actually possible with the Inari, when you stack all their rules, to get them +3 to their hit rolls when they're soul bursting and re-rolling 1s.
Okay.
Now, they already hit on 3s anyway, which means that if they roll a 1, they get a reroll.
Yeah.
If they roll a 2,
Do they get a reroll every time they roll a 1, or do they only get 1 reroll?
You can only reroll a dice once.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'd be pointless.
Well, not necessarily.
So hitting on 2s because of all the pluses. So any rolls of 1, they get to reroll.
Yeah.
Any 2s will hit, but anything 3 or higher has enough pluses on it to generate free extra attacks.
Yeah.
Which means these 10 Striking Scorpions in the right, like with the right combination of rules, goes in and goes, oh, okay, cool. We get 30 attacks and we generated 50 hits. And you're left going, hang on a minute. These are just cheapo, like, they're meant for killing, like, Gene Stealer Cult and Gaunts and Guardsmen and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, you can charge these things into a unit of 30 models and just blend the entire unit in one round of combat.
Yeah.
Now, it does require the right
That's
combinations
really
and the
mental
right
image.
tricks and, all the... You do need to know what you're doing to get that to work. But that's what intrigues me about this as an army, because it gives these units that probably don't see much table time, things like Striking Scorpions and Howling Banshees and Wraithblades, an opportunity to go on the table and actually do some really serious work.
Yeah.
The only downside is that it, much like the previous version of Soul Burst, really polarized what you took because you wanted all these shooting units and you wanted to leverage the fact they could shoot twice. This does, because it's just a fight first mechanic, why would I ever take a Dark Reaper unit as an Inari? Or why would I take a Hemlock Wraith Fighter as an Ari? Or why would I take Carbolite Warriors as an Ari? Because all of a sudden they're not getting the same benefits as a combat unit. Whereas if you keep, say, we'll go back to the Eldar. If I take an Ari, a Fire Prism, an Ari tank, it gets the fight first in combat. Whoop-de-doo. But if I take it as an Alatok Craftworld tank, it gets -1 to hit. Like I feel like they've taken the Inari and pushed it too far in the opposite direction. They've not actually thought about the balance across all of the units that they have available to them. And I'm really hoping that this index is actually just a stopgap before we get a proper model range, a la the Gene Stealer Cult and the Harlequins, where we get a few troops and a HQ and elites and that sort of thing. Because at the moment, all they've done is they've gone, oh, okay, cool. So we've sold, it feels like they've gone, okay, we've sold all of these shooting units for the last 3 years of Inari. We need to sell some of these close combat units. So we're going to flip Soul Burst on its head, make it all about combat, and then see if we can, go down that road. Now, I genuinely don't think that's what they've done, but it certainly feels that way when you're going through the list and there's not a genuinely good reason to play a pure Inari army. You're better off going, okay, any combat elements I want to run are going to be Inari, but anything not combat related, like I say, Fire Prisms, Dark Reapers, Drakari Ravagers, any aircraft, a lot of those will be quite happily staying whatever detachment that's not Inari, which is a bit frustrating because it'd be nice to see a little bit of thought put into it. That
I am sure that there's been a lot of thought put into it.
Well, there's clearly been a lot of work in the background to try and make Soulburst work. And
because prior to this, it made it really unbalanced.
Yeah.
So this has worked to this. I believe that this is a lot of effort's gone into this to try and make it a much more balanced outcome.
Yeah, and the people who are upset about it the most are the ones who are looking for the easy mode button to try and go, oh, cool, I get twice as many actions as you do, so I win. Or at least, that's what the internet perception was. It was about, I get to play more of the game than you do, therefore
yeah, and
I win.
If I get to interrupt and keep banging you on the head, I'm much more likely to, have a better outcome.
So it's an interesting mechanic, and I definitely think there's builds here for it, but it's no longer a plug-and-play army that you could, 6 months ago you could take to a tournament and do really well with just by the nature of double shooting units and double charging units and those sorts of things.
I don't like statements like that, purely because I think that
the numbers do back it up.
Yes, but you still need to know what you're doing. You
can't
just, you can't just whack an Ari army on the table and go, oh, well, I'm going to win because...
No.
You still need to know. Whereas if you've got someone who really knows what they're doing with...
Yeah.
I don't know, Grey Knight seems to be one that people aren't particularly fond of at the moment as far as winning tournaments. But...
Yeah, you're right.
You need the skill behind it as well.
And this is what I was trying to explain to people with the old version of Soulburst, is that the internet made it out like, oh, I Soulburst and I get to shoot this and do this and do this. The fact that the first time you actually got to Soulburst was in your own psychic phase, and it was a 50-50 shot of the psychic power actually working. And then if you hadn't set it up right to start the Soulburst chain, then you got to shoot twice with one unit. And that was the sum total of your Soulburst.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You need to know the strategy. This is such a complex game. There are no armies that you can that is plug and play.
No.
And you need to know how it all works. You need to practice. You need to know the armies inside out, and you need to know how to set up those chains so that when you do the Soulburst, it does all bang, 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 literally and figuratively. I don't like the term plug and play, and it's...
Look, in 7th edition, it was plug and play. I wrote an average army using the Inari 5-level deep Soulburst shenanigans and won tournaments with it, having never used the army before.
No, we probably don't share that.
Well, it's 7th edition. It's 4 years ago, and the rule, everyone knew the rules were dodgy when they the tail into 7th. But 7th
cheating then.
7th had all sorts of problems all of its own.
Anyway, so with the new version, they've got their own stratagems, they've got their own warlord traits, disciplines, relics, tactical objectives.
Yep.
What's that done to Inari?
Well, the interesting part was under the old version, you got sort of this weird hybrid access where you didn't get warlord traits when you had an Inari warlord because you had to have one of the characters.
Yeah.
You had to spend command points to get a relic, and even then you only got access to the old relics from whatever codex you were using at the time.
Yeah.
The psychic powers that they had, there were only 3 of them, and they were limited to just the Incarn and Evrain, and then there were no specific relics or tactical objectives. So it's been really good to give them, I suppose, a group of stuff that you actually want to use. Like the relics, for example, the Hungering Blade is a really cool melee weapon that you actually want to give to a combat character. And the fact that they've thought that far enough ahead to go, oh, hey, look, you know what? Let's give them a really good melee weapon to sort of go with their faction trait. Like, they gave us a 3-shot pistol as well, which baffles me, because if I get one free relic, and I've got a character that's got a shuriken pistol and a power sword, am I going to give him the sword of ultimate death stabbiness or a 3-shot pistol? I don't follow that thought process.
You have to get a lot closer to use a stabby sword of death. You can stand back and use a pistol.
Yes. Doesn't make the pistol good.
Well, depends what you're using it for.
No, it doesn't.
Depends what you're using it against.
Well, okay.
If the other opponent has got something where they, if you get in close, then you're going to die, then I want to stand back.
Look,
he says, totally dismissing me to move
it's a
on.
shuriken pistol.
I'm just saying, they've clearly
I
put
like
it
your
there for a
optimism.
reason.
I like your optimism. I do. I don't know a single competitive player who would use the Song of Iniad, the shuriken pistol.
Oh my goodness, somebody out there, jump on and tell me that you use that. I don't care if you're lying. Just jump on and say, I use this in this list, and here's why. Not so I'm right, just so he's wrong. I don't need to be right all the time. I just need him to be wrong.
Look, the Hungering Blade's a really good relic. In the hands of the character, there's obviously a couple of different characters that can have it. It does a lot of work. A flat 2 damage, good modifiers, and deals mortal wounds on 6s, which is really good. The Mirror Gaze is a helmet that's -1 to hit, which is just any modifiers at the start of the hit sequence is really good. The two that are probably the ones that pay attention to, though, are the tricky ones. So there's one called the Lost Shroud. All damage suffered by the bearer is halved, rounding up. In addition, roll a dice every time this model loses a wound, and a 5+ that wound is not lost. Now that sounds like a really interesting relic. Most Eldar characters have between 4 and 6 wounds. Halving the damage that they take is pretty solid. However, it becomes a bit bonkers when you give it to...
Stop using the term bonkers.
It becomes a little bit insane when you give it to a Wraithseer, Forge-World Wraithseer.
What do you mean by insane?
I'm
Is
about
it good or
about to
bad?
quantify that.
Oh my goodness.
So the Wraithseer is a
Do you
character.
understand how adjectives work? The adjective should describe what it means.
No, it's a leading adjective.
Oh, hurry up.
So the Wraithseer has 14 wounds, toughness 8, and a 3+ armor save, a 5+ invulnerable save, and it's a character. Now, normally, because it has more than 10 or more wounds, you can target it, which means that Wraithseers don't tend to live very long. They tend to walk around and get shot a lot. By giving it the Lost Shroud, you're now halving the damage that it takes from any hit, and then rounding that up. And then you've got a 5+ on top of that. So say you get shot by a las cannon, it's got to hit you, wound you, got to get past your invulnerable save. And then when it does those things, it gets d6 damage, and you roll a 6. Cool. Now I halve that down to 3, so now I'm only taking 3 wounds, and now I get 3 dice, and on any 5 or 6 I roll on those 3 dice, I drop another wound off each of those. So when you actually do the maths on it, a Knight Castellan only half kills a Wraithseer with this relic. And a Knight Castellan reliably kills 2 vehicles a turn in every... a 100-point Wraithseer becomes insanely durable with this relic. The other one that I've seen used a couple of times and would love to try, one of our locals here, Andrew, who was playing it with Harlequins recently, who was trying this relic. It's called Korogai's Locket. Each time an enemy unit is destroyed by an attack made by the bearer, add 1 to the bearer's move and attack characteristics for the remainder of the battle. Which doesn't sound like anything impressive unless there's a whole bunch of characters or like a Genestealer Occult Army would hate this relic. Because if you can get a character, say a Succubus from the Drakari, or even just a Huskblade Archon, or one of the combat characters, and give them this relic, every time you destroy an enemy unit, you get +1 to your move and +1 to your attacks. Now, that could very quickly, like a Harlequin Troopmaster, very quickly becomes something that's bouncing around. Like it's move 8 with 5 attacks base. If it kills 3 units, it's now move 11 with 8 attacks base. It could get really scary really quickly if you can stack that up enough times.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of really good relics there. I really like them. The tactical objectives I'll admit to having not read because they are the Maelstrom objectives.
Okay.
There are a couple here when I did glance over them that were basically just doubles up. I think it's 13 and 16. Soul Surge And for Iniad's glory, you basically have the same essential stipulation. It's really weird, but they're just worded differently.
Okay.
So Iniad's glory says score 1 victory point if 3 or more units were destroyed during this turn as a result of attacks made by Inari. And then Soul Surge is score 1 victory point if 3 or more units were destroyed during this turn as a result of attacks made by Inari that were soul bursting. The problem is, as soon as you kill 1 unit, you're soul bursting. So they're essentially the same thing, because 13 says you have to kill 3 units. 16 says you have to kill 3 units while soul bursting. So 16 essentially just means you need to kill 4 units, because the first one you kill will be soul bursting. But they're much of a muchness. One of them is casting a psychic power, pretty straightforward. Spirit Sanctuary, when this tactical objective is generated, roll a dice, score 1 victory point if no units are controlling that objective marker at the end of this turn. That's actually pretty horrible, because if you roll the wrong, like if you roll a random number and your opponent's holding it, you can't score it.
Yeah.
Score D3 victory points if you achieved at least 2 other tactical objectives this turn. That's kind of nice. They're okay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything, like there's a few weird ones there, but nothing, terrible.
So this has changed the points levels for some of the units?
Well, the characters themselves, they fixed the unit entries a little bit. Evrain is now very much a caster who can fight, as opposed to a fighter who casts really well. She's definitely a support character now who can defend herself, rather than an outright fighter at the front ranks, if that makes sense. Whereas the Vizarch now has been given his force field, which it's only taken 3 years.
So in the past, despite having the things on his...
He's been modelled with
He's been modelled with it, but has never
He's
had
never
that
he's never
force
given
field.
it. No.
And so it meant that pretty much when he got on the table...
He got stabbed and died. Yeah.
So now he should have more resilience.
Yeah, well, he's 3 up, 4 up with 5 wounds. His sword is actually good in combat. He will fight. The best thing about him, though, is auras. Because his first aura is called Way of the Blade, which gives reroll 1s to hit for friendly Inari within 6. And that alone is worth seeing him in a Harlequin detachment.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a reroll 1 aura. And giving Harlequins reroll 1s is really good.
Yeah.
His second one, which I really like, is called Champion of Iniad. Each time another Eldari model, so it's not unit, it's model, is slain within 6 of the Vizarch, roll a dice. On a 4+, he regains 1 wound. If that model was a character, he gains +1 attack for the rest of the game. So I could see him running around with, like, I could see me taking 2 or 3 cheap, like, warlocks.
Yeah.
I think they're 55 points each. Just to have them die nearby to give him his extra attacks.
Yeah.
And while they're there, they can obviously be casting spells on him to buff him, and like you'll get use out of them. But they will be jumping in front of sniper bullets if I had my way of it. Just to
See, I can't think too closely about that. That's awful.
What's really cool though is the Incarn. The Incarn is pretty amazing. It's got a good movement, hits really well. It's 9 wounds, which means you can't...
Can I interrupt and change the subject for a minute? Just for a second.
Sure.
So prior to recording this, we had this big discussion on how you pronounce Inari, because I was pronouncing it Inari and you were pronouncing it Yanari.
Yeah.
And then so you went through and you watched videos. And
they Games Workshop
and
can't decide either.
Both. Right, and then so we decided because it's Ivrain and because it's... Incarn. It must be
Inari.
It must be Inari. So yeah,
I know I haven't been consistent.
No, that's not what I'm. What this is my actual point, and the reason that I've shared all this. How would you pronounce Incarn with the it as a y?
Yincarn.
Yincarn. There's
It doesn't
no
make
I
it-
in there.
no.
It has to be Incarn.
Incarn, yeah. So it's Yncarne.
Anyway, so I'm just saying, I think
Okay.
it has to be pronounced with an it sound rather than
Itvrain, Incarn, Iniad, and Inari.
yeah. Because even what was the second one you said? Ivrain.
Ivrain.
I don't know how you can pronounce Ivrain.
Yivrain.
Oh yeah.
People do
Yivrain.
Yivrain.
But
I think the YN means that you can't really go yin kan.
Not really, because there should be an I in there
Yeah.
if it's yin kan. All right.
Anyway,
Sorry, back to the actual point now.
it's good volume of attacks. It's only 9 wounds, so you can't target it. It's got good saving throws. Its weapon is really good. Strength 6, neg 4, d6 damage, and rerolls to wound all built in. With 6 attacks base, if you've got a wounded knight, it'll charge and kill a knight pretty reliably. And what's more, it'll probably survive if the knight doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
What's most interesting is it does regain wounds like the other 2 characters if things die nearby, but also its ability to move around the table. Every time something dies on the table, regardless of friend or foe, I can pick the incarn up and put it within 1 inch of where that unit that has died. I can pick him up and just move him to where that unit was.
Oh.
Now, you can't charge on the turn that you do that, but you can heroically intervene, which means that
Dun, 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 dun.
yes, the androgynous ghost monster can chest puff out like Captain America and heroically intervene.
Nice.
What makes it really interesting, though, is you've got lots of really cool slingshot abilities. So you could, for example, have this thing in combat, strike first with it, knowing that your opponent is going to then interrupt, for example, or maybe you've started your sequence wrong and your opponent you go, oh, I should have fought with the incarn first. Now someone's going to get a chance to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can kill something else with your first attack, you can then use its ability just to pull it out of combat, so your opponent then can't interrupt and fight and kill it. So there's lots of really cool ways of slingshotting it around the board. And if things are, so say for example, things are dying in your turn, in your opponent's turn, and your incarn is out of position, there's nothing stopping you then using its ability called Summon by Death to actually pull it over to where you're about to be charged because they've just killed a unit, and then use it to heroically intervene.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of really cool combinations that the incarn provides an Eldar army of this teleporting, almost Nightcrawler-esque bouncing monster that just jumps around the table stabbing things. There's even a stratagem, although now I think about that, I don't think the stratagem actually works on it. I think it's only infantry and bikers and the... Yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
It was a mental...
something that's not going to work.
It was a mental thing of, oh, hang on, that means I can resurrect it. But no, I can't resurrect it because the stratagem doesn't let me.
Right.
But yeah, the biggest problem with the incarn is its points. Because the Vizark's just on 120 points, and he is reasonably priced. He's got a good combat stat line. He's got good auras. For 120 points, he's worth his points. Ivrain's just over 130, and she's probably worth her points. A standard Farsi is 110. She's probably better. She's equal to a Farsi in casting, but she's better in combat. Okay. So she's probably worth 132. She might even be a touch too cheap. There is no way the incarn is worth over 330 points.
Does seem quite hefty.
Well, I would say the best way I can describe the incarn is she, because it's a bit of an androgynous thing.
How about we just go with the incarn?
Is basically an avatar of Cain with a cool movement ability and the ability to cast 2 psychic powers a turn. And it's a good 80 points more than an avatar of Cain. The avatar of Cain is, I think, from memory, 250, unless it's come down recently. And there is no way that's worth 250 points. Not when you compare it to greater demons and to demon princes in particular. If the incarn was around 250 and the avatar of Cain was 180, 190... I would say that we would probably be on par, because as it stands now, if you want to put all 3 of these into an army so you get 3 detachments of an army, you're paying 600 points in 3 models.
Yeah.
So your 2,000 point army now has 1,400 points to spend on 3 detachments. And just to meet the minimums of those detachments, depending on what you're putting in those detachments, in this case, to make them worthwhile, you're going, oh, okay, cool. Well, one of them will be Harlequins.
The thing is, as well, it's not generally a 2,000 point army, is it?
Well, that's it. 1750, 1850.
Yeah.
And I was trying to build an army for an Ari for an upcoming tournament. And at 1850, I can't. Like, I can do 2 detachments with Ivrain and the Vizark.
Look, you could. You'd just be having to put some really cheap things in.
And it also means that if the
optimized,
but if the Incarn at that point doesn't pull its weight or it dies early,
yeah, you've got nothing left.
You're spending so many points on it, and 330 plus points compared to the new Chaos Knights book, for example, that I saw today, is 280 points for a Chaos Knight with no weapons. There's no way this is worth 337. It's just too expensive.
In your opinion?
I don't think I'm alone in that opinion, but I will say in my opinion. Anyway, stratagem-wise, there's some really cool ones. I'm really disappointed there are a couple of what seemingly would have been no-brainer stratagems to include that just weren't. I think that's partly because the fact we only got, I think it's 16? Yeah, 16 stratagems. Most factions get 4 pages of stratagems. We only got 2.
2, yeah.
And there's a few here that are literally just copy-pastes out of the other Eldar books, just to, keep them in line.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's a few missing that should have been copy-pastes are frustrating. So there's no fight twice stratagem, which, given the whole Inari thing was...
I was going to say, do you think it's because that's the whole Inari thing? Like, do you think that it's been innately written into the army, therefore...
Well, they can't fight twice. They just fight first.
Okay.
So, just about every faction has a 3 command point stratagem that lets them fight twice. The Inari don't, which is... I could see an argument for balance, maybe.
That's what I'm thinking.
It's a stretch.
No, it was stretch. Might be the only stretch you do this week.
There's also no stratagem that gives them a flat advance roll. So instead of rolling a d6 for their advance, they all the Eldar have you count as rolling a 6. Again, we don't have one for the Inari, despite the fact their Soul Burst thing would have meant a double move, essentially would have been an advance as part of that thing. So again, it feels like those 2 should have just been put in here.
Yeah, I do think that it might be just pulling it all the way back because it had gone too far.
Yeah, I suppose. Lightning fast reactions is in here. Fire and Fade is in here, although they did have to FAQ Fire and Fade because they put it in
already.
Here. Yep, it went in here at 2 CP and it's in all 3 of the other books at 1.
Oh.
And everyone went, well, hang on, are you going to put the other ones up or are you going to put this one down? Because one of those 2 things needs to happen and we're all hoping this one goes down. And it did.
Okay.
Then you've got Webway Ambush, which is basically the same as... the other, where you get to deep strike units.
Yep.
And there's the relic one as well, which gives you extra relics. Some of the cool ones, though, A Taste for Death is great for things like Harlequin Bikes, because when you destroy an enemy unit as a result of an attack with a ranged weapon, add 1 to the hit rolls of melee weapons until the end of the turn. So the problem with that is it only really comes into play when you're fighting things that have big minuses to hit. Because if you've just killed something with your guns, you're now soul bursting. Which means if you're now fighting straight after that, it means you've charged. Which means you're fighting first, which means you're already getting a +1. So there's a few... They look cool until you realise that they kind of don't do what you think they do because you're already getting that benefit. Exalted of Iniad's quite cool because it means you can get an extra warlord trait on another character, and there are a couple of good warlord traits. There's one that lets you modify leadership. My biggest complaint of this entire list, though, and I always like having complaints, no one should be surprised.
Yeah.
Shrine of the Whispering God.
Go back to my earlier.
Yep.
Sorry, Karen. Shrine of the
Whispering God. It's 2 command points. Use this stratagem before the battle. Select up to 3 units of Inari Incubi from your army. Each of these units gains the Strength from Death ability, even though Incubi normally cannot have this ability. Seems pretty reasonable because you've just been told Incubi can't have Strength from Death, and now they can. Except it goes against the entire fluff of and story and history of the Inari. Because when Ivrain escapes the fighting pits and she's accompanied by the Vizarch is actually an Incubi and he takes his entire shrine with her, and they are some of the first Inari. So for some bizarre reason, Games Workshop have decided you can put Incubi in an Inari army. They just don't get anything from it unless you're willing to spend 2 command points on it to make them like everyone else. I don't understand that thought process at all. People don't use Incubi at the moment because they're overpriced and there are other things
Yeah.
that do better things. So why would I put Incubi in this army
And then have to
and then have to pay
for it
more
get done?
command points to get them to do what other units are doing naturally?
Do you think there's something that you're missing there?
I don't think so. Not that I can come up with. If someone can come up with something, like why this would make Incubi extra specially good,
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is there something there that makes it warrant doing this?
not that I can come up with. I'll do it
Something
and put them in an army because I like the models, but having to spend command points on it is just a bit weird. Yeah, I don't understand why they put that limit on it. I really don't.
Okay.
I'll very quickly talk about the Warlord traits and the Psychic powers. The Warlord traits, they're all pretty good. One of them lets you heal wounds. One of them lets you add 1 to your attacks and strength when you're soul bursting. One of them is a command point regenerator and rerolls each turn. Probably the worst one is the leadership modifier. There's one that lets you pile in and consolidate 6 instead of 3, and then there's one that lets you score 2 hits instead of 1. They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
I can see Walker of Many Paths, which is the command point regenerator, being used as a default for most players. And each of the other characters does actually come with fixed Warlord traits. So the Vizarch gets Master of Death, which is the score 2 hits instead of 1. Ivrain gets Favoured of Iniad, which is pile in and consolidate 6 instead of 3. And the Incarn gets Warden of Souls, which is +1 attacks and strength when soul bursting. So none of them get the one that you probably want, but I can see someone taking another Warlord and then spending the CP, say, to get Master of Death for the Vizarch or Warden of Souls for the Incarn. I think both of those are pretty reasonable. There was another one that's just sort of popped into my head.
Did it then fly out the other side?
Yeah, it did, and I can't remember what it was about. God damn it. No, it's gone. It was another stratagem one that I went, oh, that's another combination that I've just come up with. And now I can't think of it, so it doesn't matter.
Well, if you do think of it, you can turn that into a blog post and whack it up.
Okay. Revenant Discipline. They're all reasonable psychic powers. Gaze of Iniad is basically a smite that you can target with. Storm of Whispers is it's a blast aura that does mortal wounds, which is okay. Word of the Phoenix is quite a cute one. It heals models, but what's more interesting is you can target infantry and bikers, and if there are no wounded models, you can actually resurrect models. Now, it works great on Wraithblades and Wraithguard because they're 3-wound models, so healing those 50-point models and getting them to stand back up and keep fighting is great. Someone pointed this out online. I can't tell you who because I didn't catch their name.
Yep.
So credit to whoever it was who pointed this out. Viper jet bikes are considered NRE bikers. So you can put a 65, 70-point bike with 2 crew and heavy weapons and all the rest of it on the table in squadrons of 3. And then if one of them dies, you can resurrect it because it has all the keywords to resurrect, despite it being a flying vehicle, which is kind of cool. Unbind Souls is basically Doom, but it only works in close combat, so it's reroll wounds, which is fairly good. Shield of Iniad is a 5+ invulnerable save with an aura, and Ancestor's Grace is reroll 1s to hit, which again, like I mentioned earlier, is great for Harlequins. The other thing to point out is things like the Hemlock Wraithfighter, which gets psychic powers. If you make it an RE, is actually really solid because you can give it the 5+ invulnerable save aura and then have it fly in squadrons with other planes to give them all invulnerable saves. You can use it to deliver Doom using Unbind Souls for units that need it. You can fly into the middle of enemies with Storm of Whispers and then pop a 6-inch aura around it to deal damage to everyone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really cool things that you can kind of combo off, even using Word of the Phoenix to fly around and then resurrect your bikes and stuff who can keep up with the plane as they die. A lot of it's just going to be finding those, and I think this isn't an army. Eldar can be an army that people just buy the cool stuff, and most of it's pretty good, and it works, so you can kind of buy what you like and it'll play well on the table. The Inari is going to need you actually to build with purpose.
Think about it, put some strategy behind it.
You can't just chuck stuff into an Inari army and then expect it to work on the table because it's got a few cool strats and a few cool relics and a few cool abilities, and unless it all works in tandem, it's not going to work. And you're just going to waste some time and money and effort. What I do like about this White Dwarf, if you haven't actually purchased a copy, it actually goes through and republishes all of the colour scheme stuff that was in Book 2, Gathering Storm Book 2 of the Inari. So it shows you off the Viper Jetbike colour schemes, the Harlequin Starweaver colour schemes, Incubi, Wraith Guards, all the bits and pieces. It also gives you some coloured, actually not just
photos.
Not artwork, but photos, and then goes through and explains how to paint a basic Aspect Warrior Exarch. So this is a Dire Avenger, but more importantly, it gives you a paint splatter on the Incarn, which is a really intimidating model. And while I'll probably follow parts of it, I'll put my own twist on it because it's my own thing. But I can see that being really useful for people who this model is an intimidating kit.
People who perhaps just started or...
I really, really like that there's all this extra stuff that's gone into this. There's clearly been, a group of playtesters who've been involved in writing parts of it, and the Phil Kelly's written down there as part of the author as well, who's one of the main players in the Eldar rules and story and process. Phil in the past has been a little bit over eager with making Eldar as good as they could be. And this doesn't feel like he's done that. I feel like
that, or feels like somebody's reined him all the way back in.
Could be.
Yeah.
I really do like the what you can achieve with this book. I feel like there's a build there that it's going to require a little bit of playing and mucking about with, and I can't help but feel like you want a Wraithseer from Forge World as an almost certain first HQ choice, just because it's going to be so good in this combination, because you're going to want Wraith Blades for combat. And it's...
What a shame you're on a buying ban till you get your Titan finished.
So what? Okay, so as soon as that Warlord's done...
We can discuss the next thing that gets purchased.
Okay, fine. Because I think
I saw that loophole and closed that really darn quick.
I was just going to say, I definitely think I need at least 20 Wraith Blades and a Wraithseer.
I definitely think you don't.
I don't have any of those. From my Eldar collection, I don't have those units.
Guess what? You've managed this long without them.
No, I definitely think I need them.
Is there anything else that you think needs to be covered about Ynnari before we say goodbye?
Inari.
Yeah, Inari.
No, look, I think we're going to see players who are they going to win a GT or some major event internationally? I don't think they're going to compete with the likes of the Loyal 32 Knights and those sort of high-end, ultra-competitive armies that people take to things like LVO and Nova and Adepticon, because they are a combo niche force that if any one thing doesn't work,
the whole thing falls
the
down.
whole thing doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So I think with the right run, with the right matchups through a tournament, if you went to LVO and finished in the top 20, you've done pretty frickin' well. But I think the more likely scenario is, particularly in ITC, and it's quite clever, for ITC rankings, if you want to compete for the Inari faction, you have to be pure Inari. You can't combo it off with non-Inari Eldar.
Okay.
So I think the people who are competing for that are going to be in their own little category, only fielding Inari. I think most people are going to take Inari as an option to supplement something else.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I didn't mention this right at the start, all three characters, if you include them, say for example, I'm running a Craftworld detachment of Ulthwai with Eldrad, I can actually put any of the Inari characters into that army and not have them become Inari.
Ah, that was actually something I meant to bring up as well.
So it lets you put these characters in as another tool in the toolbox for non-Inari armies. Now, there's very niche reasons why you do that, because a lot of their auras and abilities only affect Inari. But things like adding the Ivrain to a Drakari army, she doesn't break the Battle Brothers rules. She, which I'll talk about in a second, because that's another hole. But she's a psyker, which means you don't have to spend CP or build another detachment of Craftworld to get psychic defense.
Yeah.
She just goes in the army.
Yeah.
And I'm going to very quickly cover this because I think it's hilarious that this has been messed up before we wrap this segment up. If you're playing match play, the Battle Brothers rule means that you can only build a detachment with certain keywords. You can't use, among others, Eldari or Inari to form a detachment.
Yeah.
Now, the section on Battleforge says you can include Evrain, the Vizark, or the Incarn in these detachments, provided they don't include any of these other ones.
Mm-hmm.
If they're included, you can choose for that detachment to remain normal or become an Inari. If you choose them to remain, then you can include these 3 models without preventing other units from gaining their detachment abilities. Well, that's all well and good.
Yeah.
But the only keywords that they actually have are Eldari and Inari.
Mm.
So technically, I can't actually put them in an army. Because when I build the detachment, every model in the detachment has to share a keyword that isn't Eldari or Inari. And the only keywords these 3 models have
Is those 2.
are those 2.
Mm.
Clearly, that's not the intent.
No.
But I find it
Interesting.
entertaining that they didn't give them another keyword. And all they needed to do, which is why I find it so funny, is that when you build and when you turn them into an Ari, you lose the Craftworld keyword and you replace it with Reborn Asuryani. If you have got Cabal or Witch Cult, you become Reborn Drakari. And if you've got Mask, you become Reborn Harlequins. It wouldn't have been hard for them to put those 4 Reborn keywords into these 3 data sheets so that they can go in any of those that you feel like, and that fixes it. Because then you can meet the keyword requirements.
Yeah.
You meet detachment requirements, you meet army requirements, and it all just clicks.
It works, yeah.
Or if you had if they added like a Reborn in brackets, and in their entry said replace Reborn with Reborn Harlequins or Reborn or whatever, X, Y, or Z, depending on what detachment they went in, that'd fix it as well.
Yeah.
It just feels like they went, oh, everyone knows what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So and it's another one of those very clear intent, but a bit grey in the rules.
Sometimes, though, I think that when this is all you do all the time, you miss the little things because you know what it means.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by this is everything written there makes me go, yes, that's what it's intended to do, but that's, not what it did. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there then, and we'll be back in just a second to wrap up the episode. So I'm wondering whether we should record 2 outros. One that I can put in after I've recorded for Varsity, and one that assumes I didn't record for Varsity.
Right.
Because I don't know what they're going to be hearing. So you've either just heard us talk about Inari, or you've just heard a section of stuff with Caleb from Varsity. Either way, we'll have him on at some point in the future. Whether it's this episode and then it's in the past, or in the future, I'm not sure yet. I'm overthinking that, I think. But yeah, the Inari is an interesting one, and we've actually kept this episode down to what'll probably end up being an hour and a half, which is good. Yeah,
I think that you need to play some games of this and see how it works, and then come back and do a follow-up with it.
So I need to get some Wraith Blades.
We've discussed this.
That's all right. I've actually got some more Harlequins on sprue that I can paint in the meantime and use them. But I've already got a Harlequin army that's painted, so I can use them first while I paint the Warlord.
Good plan.
Well, I thought you'd appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly more than me doing something else. Look, I even stopped painting the Raven Guard because you told me I had to paint the Warlord first.
You are such a
What?
So speaking of that, when is that event?
So Warmaster is the 27th of July, so it's a couple of weeks away now. Lists were actually meant to be due on Friday night or Friday night.
Last Friday?
Yep.
Oh, so what penalty will you be incurring?
None, because 6 hours before the deadline, I went to the Facebook page and went, the players pack says lists are due tonight. Does everyone realise this? Because there's been no reminders and it's not really clear. And the TO, who's a good friend of ours, got on and went, because the Chaos Knights Codex dropped on the next day.
Yeah, okay.
He went, I'm going to push it back a week so that the Chaos Knights get included in the event. So I've now got until... And he's not done it on Friday night, he's done it for Saturday night. So I've still got this whole week to figure out what I'm taking.
Well, we're out Saturday night, so you need to get it done.
Are we out, are we?
Yes,
we are too, yes. So I've got an army list to figure out. And I'd written an Anari one, and it would require me to paint the Vizark and Ivrain.
Have you built them?
Yeah. They're both
Oh, that's
undercoated
something.
and ready to go. And painting them 2 infantry models, so we can smash them out pretty quickly. But the Harlequin component of it was 700 points for the minimums, including one of those 2 characters. And then to put the second one in with the second character and the fire support the army needs to make the Harlequins get where they need to get to, and the minimum troops, that was the army. It was...
Yeah.
It was...
How many points is it?
1850.
I feel like this is probably not a conversation to have while we're recording it, but, it doesn't normally stop me. I feel like maybe you're a bit all over the place with your army choices. I kind of feel like I bang on about the fact that it's really important to play a lot with a certain army and to know how it works and to get lots of practice with it and, to know what it's going to do in different situations. You are chopping and changing armies on a daily basis. You do so on a daily basis. And, you took Grey Knights last time. What did you take the time before that?
I don't remember.
It was something else that was weird and wacky. And, are you going to actually get a particular army that you're going to be taking to tournaments so you can actually try and... Yeah, I've noticed.
Genestealer Cult was the one before that.
Oh, that's right, yeah. The idea was that you were going to take the Genestealer Cult, you were going to work on that. That was going to be the one that you were working on for this particular time. Now, I know that you totally overdid it with the painting those models, and so that potentially is what pushed you over the edge. But I still think, you're not going to improve if you don't practice.
I get that. But what I want out of the events isn't necessarily what the average gamer wants out of events. I want to go along and play weird armies and try and win with them.
But you're not going to win with them if you don't practice with them.
But you
can't just go the night before and go, I think I might put all this together. Let's see how it goes. Oh, yeah, did all right. On to the next one.
Why not?
Well, I suppose why not? As I was saying it, I was thinking why not. But I don't know. Surely do you not want to see how can you tweak it and what can you do and how can
I spent years doing that. All through 5th edition and 6th edition and 7th edition. The game is more fun now in terms of just picking it up and playing it than it has been for all of 7th and 6th. And it's at a point now where I want to go along with weird the Tau army. I'm going to run all stealth suit Tau army. Was it any good? Yeah, it worked. Could it be made better by taking some of those things out and putting more traditional units in?
Could it be made better by practicing?
No.
Learning it a little bit better?
No.
Developing some strategy?
It's missing fundamental parts of a Tau army that make it would turn it from a good Tau army to a great Tau army. But it breaks the theme. And it's the same with a lot of the armies I build. It's could I make it better by investing time and money to put different units in, paint different units.
I just think could you make it better by actually knowing the army a little bit better?
As arrogant as it sounds, no. I don't think I could.
You're right, it does sound arrogant, and I actually think you're wrong. Because when we've recorded games here and you've picked up an army for the first time, you could do better.
Yeah, but in the case of the Stealth Tau army, it's such a mono... it's such a rigid list that it was built with only 2 or 3 units in mind. The only way it gets better is by stepping outside of that own self-constraint.
What about the Sisters of Battle army or
With the Sisters of Battle army, if you're happy for me to spend money on that army...
We've already ascertained that no, I'm not. But, there's that one that's sitting there.
But a lot of those armies, you're also missing the history. No, you're missing the history of those armies. Those armies were built at a time when the points were different, the game was different, and I built them as an army, not a collection. Which means that those Sisters of Battle, when I built them with 2,000 points, they're now less than 1,500.
Why bring them out to play against Skin
Because they're fun.
All right. Well, what about the 3 that we've just spoken about?
What, give me them. Which ones?
Okay, well, Tower, we might have actually just ascertained that one's probably not the best one to think about.
The Tower are also 3rd edition metal models that you can't buy anymore.
The Genestealer Cult?
The Genestealer Cult are probably needing another somewhere between $400 and $700 spent on them after the first round. Like, you want me to develop them?
I want you to develop you. Not them. I want you to develop you.
And having played a tournament...
Okay, here is my challenge. I want you to take the absolute crappest army. Sorry if people don't like the word crap. The most rubbish army you can, and I want you to win with those. Because I want you to develop you.
That's what I've been trying to do.
But you can't do that if you change armies every single game.
Of course you can.
You can't. You can't get better with that army if you only play it once.
Well, I deny that thoroughly.
I know, and you're wrong. You started out by saying you're wrong. Like, yeah. Okay.
I'm enjoying my hobby at the moment. I'm playing with what I want to play with without caring about the bigger picture or what that means for rankings, or I'm playing what I want to play. And it doesn't matter whether I win or lose.
I don't want to use this term because I know that I shouldn't, but I feel like I'm married to an ADHD gamer, or a magpie. Ooh, shiny.
What?
I'm going to do this. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to do that. No, I'm not. I'm going to do this. Or list to do tomorrow. Okay, I've written this whole list. I'm going to do something totally different.
You're still making it sound like it's a bad thing.
It's driving me insane.
Well, hang on. This episode airs on Wednesday.
Well, that depends whether or not my magpie manages to get it edited.
I always get it edited.
Sometimes it's just
it goes out on Wednesday.
Midnight.
It goes out every time.
It's not Wednesday in Sydney.
Well, look, according to their schedule, when it comes out on bloody Wednesday. If that doesn't matter. Anyway, why don't I include a couple of options for players, and they can pick what I'm going to play?
Okay, players, you need to pick the crappiest army possible. We should just do an army by...
Well, it's got to be painted, so they're only going to have a pick of what I actually own. I'm not going to just, if it's unpainted, it doesn't get to be used.
Yeah, but you've got heaps of painted stuff.
Yeah. I can give them a few different options, and they can pick the army. And then I can submit it, and then if I have to paint Ivrain and the Vizark...
I honestly think that given we've just done an episode on...
Inari.
I keep wanting to say Inari, not Inari. We had this whole conversation. I'm the one that thought it should be Inari. Anyway, since we've... Oh, someone's making noodles. I think...
And you call me the magpie. Jesus Christ.
It's just about food. Yes, I think that since we've just done a whole episode about Inari, I think that you should probably take Inari.
Fine. I'll take Inari. I'll work something out. I wonder if I...
Oh, my God. I have to leave now. Quick, wrap up.
And she wonders why I'm a magpie. We hope you enjoyed the episode. This has been a very interesting one. My voice is going, which is great.
It's been a bit of an odd wrap-up. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I'm not sorry. I'm sorry to people listening, but not to you.
Anything else you want to add?
Possibly. Who knows?
Okay.
I do have to leave.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you very much for following us on Facebook. And once we've got some footage from the YouTubes, for YouTube, for the Apocalypse stuff, we will start sharing some snippets.
Of course, that would depend on whether or not he gets the Warlord.
The Warlord's not being in the inaugural game. That's the Revenant. Anyway,
you need to get on with it.
We'll see you at the next episode.
And however you choose to game, whether you are a magpie gamer or whether you stick to playing the strongest, best army that you've been had for years and you're added to it and you've developed your skills and strategies, or whether you're like Michael and play a different army every time you pick up the bag, pick up your dice, we hope that you have happy gaming.
Thanks. You've been listening to the Objective Secured podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can visit our website, objectivesecured.com.au. You can find us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Objective Secured, or you can email us, obsec@optusnet.com.au. Thanks for listening.